1988, a scene exploded in the UK that would influence global youth culture for the next 30 years. It was known as acid house, and that year became known as the Summer of Love. I, like many 18-year-olds at the time, was part of the acid house scene, spending my nights at clubs like Future, Spectrum and The Trip, where the eclectic mix of music and people, combined with a drug called ecstasy, was both life-changing and, looking back on it, as close to a religious experience as I've ever had. Fast forward to 2016, and acid house is back. Except this time, the people dancing in sweaty clubs until 6 AM are 50 years old, and some of the DJs are even older. I want to experience the acid house feeling again, so I head to London to meet the legends behind acid house and the Gen Xers who are still partying like it's 1988.
Throughout your journey, absolute power and complimentary Wi-Fi is available in every.
In 1987, myself and Paul Oakenfold, Nicky Holloway and Johnny Walker, we went off on a week's holiday to celebrate Paul's birthday in Ibiza. It was a real remarkable, eye-opening experience because what we found there was a combination of house music, techno music and what we term as Balearic beats, which is an openness to music, and a DJ called Alfredo.
We started in Amnesia 84, 85, 86. There was people from everywhere, man, and every color and every age. Then came this invasion of English people, British.
Amnesia was more of an underground club, but with you know, a very glamorous crowd at the same time. Now, Alfredo would start out with rock music, reggae, hip-hop, funk, Latin, real mixture, indie, rock, all kinds of music. It was a unique experience hearing that music played in the open air and also the combination of ecstasy as well. It would get going about 4 in the morning and then finish around 9 or midday.
That year had become very friendly with people like Paul and Carl Cox and whatever, and Oakie was like, I'm taking this back to London. And the rest, they say, is history.
Ian and myself put together a club called The Future, which was the first Balearic club. It was on a Thursday night, and the idea was that it was for people who were so-called in the know.
Future was like an incredibly credible night. You know, you're out on a school night, you were breaking all the rules.
And it became very popular very quickly. And the music there was based on a lot of the production and remixes I was doing for the Happy Mondays, Stone Roses, The Cure.
What was it about that original Balearic scene that
I think
you
you
fell in
had
love
the
with?
freedom to play what you wanted to. It's like, I used to play a lot of the Happy Mondays stuff as well. And you had that freedom to do it. It was just that bringing people together.
First Shoom event was on December the 3rd in the fitness centre, which was a gym by day. And I thought one day I'm going to come back here and I'm going to have a club with a dance floor that's filled with people that absolutely love the music I'm playing. I had this vision, and that's exactly what happened.
We did a Monday night in the much bigger room in the Heaven nightclub complex, which was Spectrum. And Spectrum was the biggest acid house club at that time.
We started doing this fanzine and I was just cut and paste, and we'd write rubbish and cut bits out of magazines and stick them on and take them to a printer. It was a kind of cool little underground thing and people used to buy it. And then Ibiza come along and Paul Oakenfold, and he wrote this article and he said, right, print the article, but don't put my name because it's got drugs in it and I'm in the industry. The headline was Bermondsey goes Balearic, and I spelt Balearic wrong. I spelt it Balearic. And that was the first ever article on what would become known as Acid House. And suddenly we were the voice of Acid House.
Just kept getting bigger, you know, and we all know Oakie's a businessman. You know, what we're going to do now? So then the Land of Oz was born and people still wanted to go out, so, you know, and then Loud Noise was born.
Remember 87's when we went and we started it. 88 is the...
January, February of 88, you could see it was going, and it was going really quickly.
Our club was the front page of the national newspaper, The Sun, Spectrum, Heaven on Earth, right? And then they titled it Hell on Earth. It was very smart of Heaven, because they said, look, we can get around this. We just changed the name and give it 2 weeks. So it looked like Spectrum closed down. And it was called The Land of Oz, Follow the Yellow Brick Road. And KLF, the band, played. We had the Orb, we were in the chill-out room, we had Boyzone, Terry Farley. It was so cutting edge.
At that time in 87, 88, we really believed that, you know, we were changing the world. And we did change the world.
Everyone was buzzing about this thing called Acid House and Ecstasy, frankly. They were just so sort of, you know, kind of evangelical about it. I thought, I've got to check it out.
We were about having a great time as a community around music and expression and creativity and achievement.
I'm sure people have asked you about Acid House and your role in it and how you were part of creating it, and you know, you're perceived to be a legendary DJ and founder of that scene. But we can go back to talk about that. Yeah, you are. Yeah. You are that.
Sounded pregnant if you haven't done it.
Everything just sort of crumbled away, you know. There was no racism, there was no misogyny, there was no class divide, there was no, you know, and I know it sounds like crazy utopianism and things, but for a few years there, it was a kind of Camelot, you know, everybody was just there for the music. I mean, I'm a woman, you know, I didn't have to put loads of makeup on. I didn't even wear a bra for 3 years. I was just there to hear the music the same as anybody else.
We are children of the light, and our kingdom is the night. Never dared to ask the question. Now I found 1,000 more.
We were mixing DJs. You know, the thought of a female DJ used to be a bunny girl handing a record to someone in Stringfellows. You know, female DJs.
It was a social phenomenon, like punk was. It was something which was beyond just the music, just beyond there was something in the air.
There was the situation of apartheid in South Africa. The Berlin Wall fell shortly after that initial 88 wave. So things were really changing on the political landscape.
People who started that whole scene or became involved in that scene actually had a really positive effect, and it influenced the culture in a big, big way.
Whether it was graphic design, whether, you know, artwork, fashion, studio production, singing, producing music, playing music, becoming DJs, a whole industry emerged as a result of these handful of clubs around the UK.
I mean, the worst you can say about it is it's inclusive and it's a great community and people can be free. Yeah. You know, what's that against? It doesn't really stand in opposition to anything other than sort of a conservative right ideal that, you know, which it needed to at the tail end of the 80s.
Yeah, it stands in opposition to British culture, which I think was
You're right,
so
the stiff upper lip.
The catalyst was definitely groups of people coming back from Ibiza with a new soundtrack, but more importantly, a new drug. So the general idea was, you know, don't take this out. You won't be able to dance, your legs will be all wobbly, you want to sit down all night. And then suddenly these people come back from Ibiza go, no, no, you've got it all wrong.
My first love.
Ecstasy was the thing that opened up your mind and was like, wow. And all of a sudden, I had this whole new family of friends.
You should take drugs, but not ecstasies. Ecstasies was for rich people. You should take mescaline. And mescaline was not so controllable.
With ecstasy, you'd be in a situation where there'd be people where a few weeks before you'd be terrified of. They'd, you know, like hooligans. Suddenly you were best mates on the dance floor.
house thing was just, you know, a follow on from what went before. We were all into the latest black American electronic music. They filtered in bit by bit. I think the perspective for a lot of clubbers in London is like, wow, where's this come from?
But also at the same time, the newspapers were scandalising it and demonising this, you know, acid airport. They thought acid house was everybody was using LSD, which wasn't the case. And they wanted to demonise it. But what they did effectively is they publicised it to such a wide group of people. You know, you had someone working on a building site or in the office on a Monday morning, they're like, you know, can't stand my job. What's this, you know, what's this scene, what, you know, acid house and raves, what's this all about? So the next weekend they go off to a party and their life completely changed.
There's never been a whole movement of change, of club culture that's changed youth culture. This was the birth of electronic music as it's known today.
But is the acid house legacy only the global mainstream scene known as EDM? Or is it something much more profound? Something's happening here. Why are people in their 40s and 50s still into this scene that is now nearly 30 years old? And that's your club.
The idea was to try and recreate that same vibe as those parties from 88, 89. First of all, we set up a Facebook page, you know, We Are Balearic, purely for the love of the music. And then we thought, hang on a minute, so many people were just posting music and I was getting 50, 60 people a day joining the group, and I thought, I'm going to try and do a party. But I'm going to book all my favourite DJs, and luckily all of them were available. And that was basically it, and then just hope that people are going to buy the tickets and turn up. And as you know, over 500 people in there, and everybody's been ringing me since and saying, when's the next one? You know, you just recreated that vibe.
You know, I was a little bit averse to, you know, playing classic nights. That music is so great, and it's making an impact on a new generation, and those records sound new to that generation, which we can't forget. Reciprocation of the energy from the dance floor to that music actually felt like playing at times for the first time.
People want to hear music that's got really good feeling to it, and they want to have a bit of nostalgia, but events like this are doing both. They've got that nostalgia, but they've also got then the current sound, which is also taken from the nostalgic sort of sound of you know, and all those samples that are very cleverly done, and people's emotions are connected with those times that they've had.
I just think a lot of people have had children, kind of nailed their careers, they're in good positions. But ultimately what they love is what they always loved, which was the people that they were around, the energy that the people projected, the music that was absolutely prevalent. When you don't find that with that kind of energy and that kind of love that acid house brought, I don't think you ever really want to be anywhere else in respect of around what kind of people.
We always say Leeds is the most Balearic town in Britain. It's a lot of kind of men in their 40s and women who like kind of bought bars and amazing sound systems, and they want to hear eclectic music, and they have a wide knowledge of music. It is that generation who now have a little bit of money and a little bit of business skill, and they want to do what they want to do.
When people hit 45, you know, they're not tired like your grandfather was. You know, they're not shattered, they've got money. And I think it's just kind of an obvious thing, whether you're a reggae fan, a jazz fan, or a house fan, that, yeah, you know, let's go out.
So what do you think now of that 88, 89 thing at Sankey's and the other revival, retro scene?
A lot of great DJs are getting work playing there and getting to come back to Ibiza, and that scene and that music still has a relevance, and it's important to look back at it, because what that music and that time, not just the music but the whole clubbing phenomenon, was about people coming together, and it was a real sense of shared community, which is kind of missing in a lot of clubbing that goes on here now. It's very much a consumer experience.
I played a gig in Ibiza in the summer at Sankey's Soap called 88, 89. I didn't realise that I would get such a buzz playing old records to new people. Suddenly it was just like a little spark, and it was just like, this is brilliant. They didn't know 90% of the records you played, but they went mad to them. They were random Ibiza holiday pillheads, and it was brilliant. Good little rule would be old records for young kids, new records for old people.
At the moment, the few gigs that we've been doing are middle-aged Balearic heads. But tonight we're playing at Cafe Mambo, which will be a load of teenagers smelling of Lynx body spray.
You have no idea who you are.
Are you surprised that you're fucking doing this again, like to big crowds again?
This is what makes me laugh. is that no, I'm not, because I've never stopped. It's just I stopped getting interest from media and other people because they jumped on other things. I'm doing exactly the same now as I have done for 30 years.
The whole kind of retro scene in England was driven by Facebook.
Facebook has absolutely smashed it for our generation.
I wasn't on it for ages, and then also Gary Gold put me on it. And then the next thing, I got this thing, pages like this coming up, you know. And it's been really good, you know, but especially you get the photographs come up, you get your timeline, there's old photographs come up. My profile pictures, it's actually amnesia.
For me, there's nothing like a personal touch. I still have to go and meet my friends. I still have to go to a field and dance. I still have to hold a record. But this can speak to thousands of people, and we're all on the same page.
Your set would tend to be kind of stuff from back in the day.
Yeah.
Not more of a kind of retro.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, it's quite a lot of playing. Yeah. Well, tonight is obviously because it's sexy based. I'm going to start off with Peaches, the Stranglers, which is in the film. Still got it on 45.
You could easily be the oldest person potentially in the room, and you'd have Norman Cook playing, and you know he's a good 2 or 3 years older than me. Before we even bring in likes of Alfredo, you know.
You're tired most of the time, like I am now. I don't have this responsibility to play every night.
I do a club once a month. It's a Friday night, and the main set 3:30 till 5. You know, I have my dinner, I watch some telly, I go to bed and set the alarm for 1, and I drive into town. You have to manage yourself like that. You know, back in the day, I would have gone out, I'd have walked into that club at 3:30, falling all over the place, buzzing like a lunatic, giving me drinks. Now, you just kind of concentrate on the job you've got to do.
Split the parties up, you don't do it too often, so then you build to build. So people miss your DJing. You do the week in and week out, and it just doesn't gel that way.
So you play a couple of times a month, roughly?
Because it takes too long to get over.
Oh, really?
Tomorrow night I play in Austin, Texas, in a small club, only holds about 1,000 people. I'll play 3 hours and I'll play pure underground. I'm excited to play.
I played at Acid Future, which was great because it combined the original roots of the scene, the new music that's being produced that takes elements from the original Acid House records and are now presented in a modern way, and fuse those DJs together. Yeah, and I played on that party in a room, there was 3,000 people in the room. The atmosphere that was in this event was just like, you know, going back to 88, 89.
Dancing in a club to the stuff I listened to in 1988, except I'm 50 pounds heavier. I was kind of torn whether that was a good thing or a bad thing.
It's a good thing, you're never too old to party. And that's the thing, it's just like, it's made so many people happy. You know, people are just reminiscing of how things used to be.
And it was obvious that there were people taking a huge amount of drugs. But I was surprised to see people quite as fucked as they were, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as much as it was, obviously, back in the day. I mean, it was a new thing, you know, back in 88, 89.
It's part of it, right?
Yeah, it's part of the scene. People do it. I mean, and it's, you know, you can argue that alcohol's a lot worse. You know, you don't get the violence, that's for sure.
You know, there's plenty of people out there that have still got quite extraordinary stamina for this.
Are they still taking as much drugs as they did in 1988?
They're not necessarily as consistently. It might only be a once or twice a year sort of splurge. I think some of them don't hold back.
So if the spirit of Acid House lives on, and Generation X are not aging like previous generations, what's happened to my old mates, who I used to party with in 1989? We head to the first night of their internet radio show, Rude Transmissions, to find out. Why do you want to do an internet radio show? What's the motivation?
Why not? I haven't grown up. We're the last generation that did anything. There's nothing really fresh come on since that scene, is there? Yeah, I've never grown up. I never had kids, so I've got none of that. Some people can measure their lives by their children and how big their children are growing up and everything like that. I ain't got no kids, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm still 26.
You're still 26?
26, 27, something like that, yeah. I don't look it, but we're still asking around, finding new music. We're still really enjoying listening to it. And to an extent, we're a bit old to be going to the clubs that are playing this sort of music. I don't want to be stuck somewhere listening to Nina Kravitz with loads of 19-year-olds, but I absolutely love the way she plays. I love her music and things like that.
I don't think there's been anything since. I don't think kids these days will really understand how different it. You know, you took our lives at one point, say the mid to late 80s, and in the space of a couple of years, 87, 88, really pivotal. The whole thing after that, everything had fucking changed, everything.
I did a PhD in the impact of recording technologies on poetic forms.
I'm doing a PhD on mobile practice, how mobiles are changing music practice. It's
doctors.
Well, you'd think, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Do you feel grown up?
Yeah, you know, getting older's like super cool, really. I just think you get a bit more comfortable in your own skin.
If someone suddenly said, right, that's it, I'd go, right, okay, what am I going to do on a Saturday night now? You know, I'd have a couple of nice nights at the cinema, and then I'd go, I'm bored shitless now. You know, I need that adrenaline, I need that kind of thing in the week, getting a little bit nervous about the club.
In this little kind of bubble of London can be, for all generations, you know, amplified to some extent. And I don't know if that's true of all kind of major cities where there is this sort of, you know, work hard, play hard ethos that just seems to normalise itself. And you know, so I know a lot of people, you know, 40, 45, 50 years old, there's no way they've grown up in the traditional way. When I think back to my dad when he turned 40, he was reading the paper and watching the cricket. That was it. End of excitement. And so we're not growing old gracefully.
This whole sort of concept of growing old disgracefully, you know, and is it acceptable at 50 to say I'm going off clubbing? Yeah, I think it is now. Would it have been the same 30 years ago? I think you would have been considered a bit of a sad case.
The caveat is, of course, that when you see people who don't appear to be aging particularly well, you know, there's a few DJs and old clubbers that, you know, maybe they had one pill too many in '94. Clearly, we know that there's a dark side to some of the stuff that goes on, and without moderation, it can have a negative effect. And so we've got kids. That's a tough balance. You know, do you take the dangerous pill, or do you know, are you up at 7 o'clock in time to you know, take the kids to football practice? It's you know, that's the new conundrum in life. You know, it's never been a problem for a generation 20 years ago.
You've had drug problems, you've been in rehab, you've done that stuff, but you've also played around the world. There's highs and lows to it, right? Has it made your life better or worse?
Yeah, but at least Pete Tong and Paul Oakenfold paid for my rehab.
There you go.
I didn't even have my child until I was 42. I was career. My mum always worked, my dad always worked. You know, I was like, music, live it, breathe it, you know.
I took a break in 2006 and for 2 years, and I wrote a book about everything you need to know about DJing. I'd been on the circuit and, you know, kind of every week in airports, and then became a father and kind of thought, well, I should be spending a bit more time at home. Kind of made this exit. Got a bit mixed up, you know, it's kind of a bit confusing becoming a father and then, you know, kind of living this life on the road. I guess if I hadn't taken that step away, it made me evaluate a lot about who I am and also what my core competence is in life, and it's music.
You're not old and over the hill at 50. I mean, I don't even think about age. You know, we're Peter Pans.
I can't do how many requests I'm getting booked for. By the time I've done a whole weekend, and I've done a 4 o'clocker, and I've got up with my little boy, and I don't feel like I'm on the money with him, and the suitcase of guilt that they're born with, it's like it expands to about 5 kilos with me within like 2 seconds. Equally, I can't leave it alone.
So you've always wanted to live in Ibiza?
Yeah, I've lived there loads of times on and off.
Yeah.
But I can't because I'm looking after my mum. She knows I'm trying to get her to sell everything and let's go on a fucking tour, let's go, come and live with that, you know. I don't want someone looking after me mum. Right? I've got to do it. I don't want to, but I am.
So that's certainly the end of the Nicky Holloway journey is living in Ibiza.
End of it. I ain't even started yet. What's the word end of? I'm going to start up a retirement home for DJs in Ibiza.
What would your retirement home for DJs be like?
You know, remember that film? It'd be like that.
So if you had to sum up the acid effect in 3 words, what would it be?
Absolutely fucking amazing.
It's that sort of little Camelot, that little golden place where there was all of those barriers and all of those prejudice and everything that, you know, constricts society and makes it miserable. You know, just for a little while there, they were gone. And so you hold that in your heart and in your head forever, you know, and you can never forget it. Because it wasn't like it just happened once for a weekend. It happened for like maybe 2 or 3 years. And basically made us big old hippies.
Not coincidence that football hooliganism sort of ended around the same time as Acid House happened. You were supposed to love your fellow man, not beat the shit out of them because they supported another football team.
But the effect of it, we're still seeing today, and it's great. And it's next year that's going to multiply, and the year after.
Acid House isn't Acid House Records. Acid House isn't a scene. Acid House is that feeling of drum machines, drugs, mass participation of everyone on one level, one buzz. It's a community of people who maybe they don't even know they're in that community.
You're part of something, you belong, you know? It's something truly magical, it really is.
It took away a lot of barriers, a lot of prejudice, a lot of barriers between people, and I think anyone who is involved in that scene will carry that with them.
As you know, I spent 10 years working in diversity and equality, and I don't think I would ever have got into that kind of scene had it not been for putting me in a situation with Acid House, Balearic. Everybody's all right, really. You're either an arse or you're all right, and all those other little bits and pieces don't matter.
I think that the Acid House effect was like the Beatles. It was the biggest music phenomenon that ever happened since that.
Love, music, peace, fun, and an enormous roller coaster ride of a life.
I think it really took a generation and it just threw the whole thing on its head. And then it kind of landed down, and some people went off in that way, and some people went off in that way, and other people didn't do anything, and some people didn't come back from it.
A smiley face, a smiley emoticon it's everywhere. It's from just 250 people going down, scoring tabs down San Antonio has suddenly become a global thing by accident.
I wasn't thinking, am I going to be here in 30 years' time playing music, but I'm glad I'm here, I'm glad I'm alive, and I'm very, very glad that I'm still playing music and will continue to do that.
How did that experience change you?
It made me, and I think that moment in Ibiza and coming back to England was that moment where I went, okay, this is the moment now. I'm ready for it, I understand it, I want it, and I'm gonna work very hard for it.
So, we're the first generation to mature in a world where youth is a constant, a state of mind that anyone and everyone can adopt. No one laughs at old DJs or mocks artists in their 40s and 50s or even 60s. Everyone is welcome in the broad, progressive church of youth. And that's Generation X's legacy. That's our gift to future generations who won't have a midlife crisis, who won't have to get married young or work in a corporation. We took youth culture and made it global culture. We took a movement and a moment and we made it the norm. Fuck getting old.
It's